The vast central chamber of the Galactic Council Station hummed with the quiet murmurs of 100 different species. Light from an artificial sun filtered through the crystalline dome overhead, casting prismatic shadows across the tiered seating arrangement that housed representatives from every corner of the known galaxy. The air was thick with political tension, invisible currents of alliances and animosities that had flowed through this chamber for millennia before humanity had ever achieved spaceflight. Ambassador Elias Thorne stood at the entrance, straightening his formal diplomatic attire. After 5 years representing Earth in this grand arena of interstellar politics, the weight of responsibility had carved deep lines into his face. His once jet-black hair had surrendered to streams of silver, particularly at the temples. Yet his eyes remained sharp, observant. The eyes of a man who had spent decades in diplomatic service and understood that real politics happened in whispers between formal sessions, not in the grandiose speeches recorded for posterity. He watched as the Cathar delegation entered from the opposite side of the chamber. Their scaled exoskeletons gleamed under the light, an iridescent display of status that matched their notorious arrogance. At their head stalked Supreme Commander Vrax, nearly 7 feet of predatorial confidence, his ceremonial battle claws clicking against the polished floor. The Cathar had never bothered hiding their disdain for humanity, considering them barely more than clever pets who had stumbled upon spaceflight. Ambassador Thorne called a melodious voice. "A pleasure to see you this cycle." Thorne turned to find Ambassador Kalia of the Alasi approaching, her bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with a gentle blue light that indicated friendly greeting. The Alasi were among the few council species who treated humans with genuine respect rather than thinly veiled contempt. Ambassador Kalia, Thorne bowed slightly. "The pleasure is mine. I trust your delegation as well." "As well as can be expected," she replied, her inner eyelids blinking in what Thorne had learned was concern. "These are troubled times. I've heard disturbing reports about shipping disruptions in your sector. The third such accident this quarter cycle, I believe." Thorne's face remained diplomatically neutral, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Indeed, an unfortunate coincidence, I'm sure." "Coincidence," Kalia echoed, her tendrils briefly flashing yellow. "Skepticism. Ambassador, we have served together on the Commerce Committee long enough for me to speak plainly. These incidents follow a pattern. The Cathar faction and their allies are testing boundaries." "I've filed the appropriate complaints with the Council Security Commission," Thorne replied, his voice low. "And I've requested a formal investigation, which was denied due to insufficient evidence of intentional interference." Kalia finished for him. "I know. I read the minutes." The conversation paused as a group of Centauri representatives glided past, their hover platforms emitting a soft hum. Thorne waited until they were out of earshot before continuing. "Humanity is patient, Ambassador Kalia. We understand that as newcomers to the galactic stage, we must prove ourselves worthy of the Council's full attention. Patience can be admirable," Kalia responded, her tendrils now fading to a concerned purple. "But it can also be mistaken for weakness. The Cathar particularly respect decisive action above all else." The chamber's ambient tones shifted, signaling the imminent start of the session. Around them, representatives began moving to their designated positions. "Perhaps," Thorne conceded with a tired smile, "but humanity has chosen a path of diplomatic integration. We will continue to work within the system." Kalia's large eyes studied him for a moment. "I hope the system works for you before your patience runs out, Ambassador." She bowed slightly. "Until later." As she departed, Thorne's diplomatic communicator vibrated subtly against his wrist. Stepping aside to a privacy alcove, he activated the secure channel. The holographic display showed Admiral Helena Chen's stern face, the stars of Earth's Unified Defense Command gleaming on her collar. "Ambassador," she greeted him without preamble. "We have a situation. Our request for security reinforcement for the Odyssey Research Outpost has been lost in processing by Council bureaucracy. That's the 5th critical security request delayed this month." Thorne rubbed his temple. "I'll speak with Counselor Varix again, but With respect, Ambassador, Admiral Chen interrupted, these diplomatic channels are proving ineffective. The Cathar faction is systematically isolating our outposts and colonies through bureaucratic warfare, and the Council is either complicit or willfully ignorant. They're testing us, Thorn agreed, pushing boundaries, seeing how much we'll tolerate, and what happens when they push too far. The Odyssey outpost houses 3,000 civilians, including families. Its defensive capabilities are minimal by Council restriction. Thorn fell silent, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Finally, he asked, "What does Command recommend?" "The Joint Chiefs have authorized me to inform you that original time-directive preparations are underway," she said, her voice dropping even though the channel was secure. Thorn felt a cold shock run through him. Original time? That's extreme. The directive was created as a last resort. We're approaching that threshold, Ambassador. Earth Command believes it's time you were aware of the contingency. The final activation would require direct authorization from both civilian and military leadership, and would only be implemented if diplomatic channels completely failed. Thorn finished. "I understand. For now, this is merely preparatory. Continue your diplomatic efforts, Ambassador. But know that if things escalate, we're prepared to show the Council a different face of humanity." The communication ended, leaving Thorn staring at empty air. Original time directive. In his 15 years of diplomatic service, it had never progressed beyond theoretical discussions. The implications were enormous and terrifying. The chamber tones shifted to a higher pitch, the final call to assembly. Thorn straightened his posture, composed his features into the pleasant, slightly deferential expression that had become humanity's diplomatic mask, and walked to Earth's modest seat in the lower tiers of the Council chamber. As he settled into position, he noticed Supreme Commander Vrax watching him from the Cathar delegation's prominent position in the upper tiers. The Predator's slitted eyes narrowed slightly before turning away dismissively. The Grand Arbiter, a Melraci whose species had helped found the Council millennia ago, rose from the central podium. This 7,452nd formal session of the Galactic Council is now convened. The translator in Thorn's ear rendered the complex harmonic language. "Our first matter concerns trade route allocations in the Arcturus sector." Thorn listened attentively, making notes and occasionally offering Earth's perspective when recognized. But beneath his calm exterior, Admiral Chen's words echoed. Original time directive. The contingency that would change everything. 3 days later, Thorn was awakened by the harsh buzz of his emergency communicator. The timestamp showed it was 0347 station time, the middle of the designated rest period. "Ambassador Thorn," he answered, instantly alert despite the hour. The face that appeared belonged to Captain Michaels, military attaché to Earth's delegation. Her expression told him everything before she spoke. "Sir, Odyssey Research Outpost has been attacked. Preliminary reports indicate significant casualties. The attackers used advanced stealth technology to bypass the perimeter warnings." Thorn was already moving, pulling on his uniform. "Survivors?" Emergency protocols were initiated. Approximately 60% of personnel made it to shelters or escape vessels. Rescue operations are underway, but her voice faltered slightly. "Sir, we've detected Cathar energy signatures in the wreckage." The cold feeling that had been building in Thorn's chest since his conversation with Admiral Chun crystallized into something hard and sharp. "Undeniable evidence?" "Yes, sir. Their weapons leave distinctive radiation patterns. They made no attempt to disguise it." Thorn paused in the middle of fastening his collar. "They wanted us to know." "It appears so, sir." "How many dead, Captain?" "Current estimate is over 1,000, including the Children's Education Center." Thorn closed his eyes briefly, a momentary break in his professional composure. "I want the evidence compiled, verified, and ready for presentation within the hour. And give me a direct line to Earth Command." "Already done, sir. They're waiting for you." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called for 0600 station time. Thorn spent the intervening hours in secure communication with Earth's highest military and civilian authorities. The discussions were grim, decisive, and final. As he entered the council chamber, Thorn noticed the difference immediately. Usually, emergency sessions saw representatives hurrying and disheveled, concerns evident on their faces or equivalent expressions. Today, many seemed almost bored, performing their duty with minimal interest. The Cathar delegation lounged in their seats, Supreme Commander Vrax examining his battle claws with studied indifference. Ambassador Kalia intercepted Thorn before he reached Earth's position. Her tendrils were dark gray, the Alasai expression of deepest sympathy. Ambassador Thorn, I just received news of the attack. This is unconscionable. The Council must act decisively. Thank you, Ambassador, Thorn replied, his voice steady but hollow. We shall see what the Council deems appropriate. The Grand Arbiter called the session to order with undue haste, as if eager to dispense with an inconvenient interruption to the regular schedule. We convene this emergency session at the request of the Earth delegation following an unfortunate incident at one of their research facilities, the Arbiter announced. Ambassador Thorn, you may present your case. Thorn rose and walked to the central podium. The familiar weight of being viewed as a galactic footnote, a curiosity rather than an equal, settled upon him. But today it felt different. Today it felt like the last time. Honorable representatives of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice stronger than it had been in years. 12 hours ago, the Odyssey Research Outpost, a civilian scientific installation in neutral space, was attacked without provocation or warning. Over 1,000 human lives were lost, including 237 children. A murmur ran through some delegations, but many remained impassive. The Cathar representatives exchanged what appeared to be amused glances. The evidence of who perpetrated this atrocity is undeniable, Thorn continued, activating the holographic display. Technical data, radiation signatures, weapons analysis, and finally, the recovered security footage appeared, showing Cathar attack vessels systematically destroying the outpost's habitation rings. As you can see, Thorn concluded, this was not a random attack or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate massacre carried out by forces using Cathar military technology. The Grand Arbiter turned to the Cathar delegation. Supreme Commander Vrax, do you wish to respond to these accusations? Vrax rose languidly, his scaled skin catching the light as he moved to the podium. He surveyed the chamber with undisguised contempt before speaking. The Cathar Dominion categorically denies involvement in any attack on human installations, he stated, his translator rendering his harsh language in a flat, emotionless standard. The evidence presented is clearly fabricated or misinterpreted by primitive human technology. He turned his predatory gaze directly to Thorn. Perhaps if humans were more competent in managing their security protocols, such unfortunate accidents would not occur. Thorn's expression remained neutral, but inside, something shifted, a fundamental change that was reflected in the subtle straightening of his posture. Furthermore, Vrax continued, the location in question borders territory historically claimed by several species. If humans insist on establishing outposts in contested regions without proper defensive capabilities, they must accept the consequences of their naivety. Murmurs of agreement came from the Cathar's allies, while most other delegations maintained diplomatic silence. The evidence speaks for itself, Thorn responded, his voice now completely devoid of its usual conciliatory tone. We request that the Council formally condemn this attack, implement sanctions against the Cathar Dominion, and establish an independent investigation with full enforcement powers. The Grand Arbiter looked uncomfortable. These are serious measures that would require substantial deliberation. 1,000 dead citizens deserve substantial deliberation. Thorn cut in sharply, breaking protocol by interrupting the Arbiter. The chamber fell silent at this unprecedented display from the usually deferential human. Ambassador Thorn, the Arbiter said stiffly, while the Council sympathizes with your loss, proper procedures must be followed. We will need to form an exploratory committee to examine the evidence and determine if further action is warranted. How long will this committee take to form? Thorne asked. The selection process could be completed within 3 standard months, after which. 3 months, Thorne repeated flatly. And how long did it take this council to form the committee that investigated the Cathar complaint about Zentari trade privileges last cycle? The arbiter shifted uncomfortably. That was a different situation. It took 6 hours, Thorne stated. 6 hours from complaint to formal investigation. Supreme Commander Vrax made a sound that his translator didn't bother converting. It was clearly derisive laughter. The human fails to understand the complexities of council protocol, Vrax said. Some matters are naturally of greater galactic significance than the internal security failures of a minor species. Thorne looked around the chamber, taking in the faces and expressions of each delegation. Some showed genuine concern, others diplomatic neutrality, but most displayed varying degrees of indifference or impatience. The moment of truth had arrived. I request a brief recess to consult with my government, Thorne said. Formally, the arbiter, clearly relieved at the opportunity to defuse the tension, quickly agreed. This session will reconvene in 1 standard hour. As the delegations dispersed, Thorne walked purposefully to the Earth Embassy's secure communication center. The decision had already been made. All that remained was the final authorization. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen, alongside President Alvarez and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They've dismissed it, Thorne reported without preamble. As expected, President Alvarez's expression hardened. You've done everything possible through diplomatic channels, Ambassador. The evidence is irrefutable, the provocation deliberate, and the Council's response is clear. They will not protect human interests or lives. The Cathar believe we are weak, Admiral Chen added. The Council believes we are insignificant. Both assumptions are about to be corrected. Thorne took a deep breath. As Earth's senior diplomatic representative, I formally request activation of the original time directive. President Alvarez nodded gravely. Request acknowledged and approved by civilian authority. Military command confirms authorization, Admiral Chen stated. Original time directive now active. Ambassador Thorne, you are authorized to inform the Council of Humanity's change in status. The fleets are in position. Understood, Thorne said, feeling a strange calm settle over him. May history judge us kindly. The communication ended. Thorne sat motionless for several minutes, contemplating the weight of what was about to happen. 5 years of diplomatic smiles and deferential nods, of working within a system rigged against newcomers, of watching his people's interests be systematically disregarded. All of it ending today. When Thorne returned to the council chamber, the difference in his demeanor was immediately apparent to those who bothered to notice. The slightly stooped posture of deference was gone. The deferential smile had vanished. His eyes, usually carefully maintaining a non-threatening gaze, now moved across the chamber with predatorial assessment. Ambassador Kalia intercepted him at the entrance, her tendrils flickering with concern. Ambassador Thorne? Are you? Well. Thorne regarded her with genuine warmth. You have been a true ally, Ambassador Kalia. I suggest you move your delegation to the upper tiers for the remainder of this session. Confusion crossed her features, but something in his expression prevented further questions. She simply nodded and moved away. As the session reconvened, Thorne waited for the Grand Arbiter to acknowledge him. The Earth delegation may continue its presentation, the Arbiter announced, clearly expecting another round of futile evidence and appeals. Thorne walked to the central podium with measured steps. When he reached it, he didn't immediately speak, instead surveying the chamber with a gaze that caused several representatives to shift uncomfortably. On behalf of the United Earth Federation, he finally began, his voice carrying a new authority that demanded attention. I must inform this council that due to its demonstrated failure to maintain peace and justice, humanity has activated the original time directive. As of this moment, our default courtesy mode has been switched off. Confused murmurs spread through the chamber. Supreme Commander Vrax let out another untranslated sound of derision. Is this supposed to be some kind of primitive human threat? He called out, not bothering to follow protocol by addressing the arbiter. Perhaps the stress has affected the ambassador's reasoning. Thorn didn't respond to Vrax. Instead, he tapped a sequence on his communicator. Confirmed, Commander. Proceed. Suddenly, the council chamber's environmental systems flickered. The holographic displays at each delegation station simultaneously deactivated and reactivated, momentarily displaying an unfamiliar symbol, a stylized hourglass surrounded by ancient Earth script, before returning to normal. What is the meaning of this disruption? The Grand Arbiter demanded, genuine alarm in his harmonics. Before Thorn could answer, the station's master alert system activated. The chief of council security rushed to the Arbiter's podium, her expression grave as she delivered an urgent report. Sentience, the Arbiter announced, unable to keep the shock from his voice. We have received reports of unknown vessels appearing at strategic positions throughout council space. They have bypassed all detection systems and... He paused, listening to further updates, his color changing to the Mel Raci equivalent of ashen, and particularly around Cthar territory. The chamber erupted in chaos. Vrax leapt to his feet, battle claws extended in threat display. This is an act of war. The humans have violated sovereign Cthar space. No Cthar space has been violated, Thorn stated calmly, his voice somehow cutting through the din. Our vessels maintain position in neutral territory, just as your attack ships did when they approached Odyssey Outpost. The holographic display in the center of the chamber activated without command, showing real-time tactical data of hundreds of Earth vessels that had appeared simultaneously throughout the galaxy. The technology behind such a coordinated deployment, the ability to transport an entire fleet across vast distances instantaneously, was supposed to be beyond human capabilities. These vessels, Thorn continued, represent a small portion of humanity's actual defensive capacity. The technology you are witnessing has been operational for 15 years, but has remained classified. Unlike some species, we do not flaunt our military capabilities as a first introduction. The security chief approached the Arbiter again, whispering urgently. We are receiving reports, the Arbiter announced, that Cthar communication networks are experiencing severe disruption. Unknown coded transmissions are overriding their military frequencies. All eyes turned to Vrax, whose predatory composure had faltered. The Cthar delegation was frantically consulting portable communication devices, their usually controlled movements now jerky with agitation. This is a direct attack on the Cthar Dominion. Vrax snarled. Our response will be... He was interrupted by the sound of his own voice echoing from the chamber's communication system, a recorded conversation that filled the room. The human outpost is an ideal target, Vrax's unmistakable voice declared. Their defenses are minimal, and the Council will do nothing. This demonstration will remind the lesser species of their proper place. Another Cthar voice responded. The attack squadrons are prepared, Supreme Commander. We have masked our energy signatures as instructed, though some radiation traces will be unavoidable. It does not matter. Vrax's recording continued dismissively. The Council has no interest in protecting humans. They are a temporary annoyance in galactic politics, nothing more. The recording ended, leaving a stunned silence in the chamber. Vrax stood frozen, his reptilian features locked in an expression of shocked rage. That is... fabricated, he finally hissed, but without conviction. The full recording, along with verification protocols that meet Council evidentiary standards, has been transmitted to every delegation's secure channel, Thorn stated, along with detailed technical analysis confirming its authenticity beyond dispute. On cue, delegates around the chamber began receiving alerts on their communication devices. Many immediately accessed the files, their expressions changing as they reviewed the evidence. This is unprecedented, the Arbiter exclaimed. Ambassador Thorn, while this evidence is disturbing, the manner of its presentation and the current positioning of Earth military forces constitutes a violation of Council protocols that, your protocols, Thorn interrupted coldly, have consistently failed to protect human lives and interests. They have been manipulated to maintain power imbalances and preserve the status quo. As of today, Earth will no longer be bound by protocols that serve only to enable our destruction. A new alert sounded. The security chief, now visibly distressed, reported, "A Cthar patrol vessel has attempted to engage one of the Earth's ships in the Proxima sector." The central display shifted to show tactical footage of a Cthar warship approaching an Earth vessel half its size. The Cthar ship fired what appeared to be a warning shot across the Earth vessel's bow. In response, a barely visible pulse emanated from the Earth ship. The Cthar vessel didn't explode or break apart. It simply went dark, its systems completely disabled, now drifting powerless in space. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The technology to selectively disable a military vessel of that class without destroying it was thought to be theoretical at best. "As you can see," Thorne continued, his voice level, "we have exercised extreme restraint. The Cthar vessel fired first. We could have destroyed it completely, but chose temporary incapacitation instead. Their crew remains unharmed, though they may find their detention facilities considerably more comfortable than the ones they had prepared for the scientists and children of Odyssey Outpost." Supreme Commander Vrax, now sensing the changing mood of the Council, attempted to regain control. "The Cthar Dominion will not be intimidated by theatrical displays. If the humans want war." "We do not want war," Thorne cut him off sharply. "Had we wanted war, this conversation would not be happening. What we want is justice for our dead and recognition of our rightful place in this council." He turned to address the entire chamber. "For decades, humanity has presented a carefully cultivated diplomatic face to the galaxy. We chose courtesy, patience, and cooperation despite frequent provocations and dismissals. We worked within your systems, followed your protocols, and respected your traditions, even when they were used against us." Thorne's gaze swept the chamber, making deliberate eye contact with key representatives. That diplomatic face was genuine, but it was not our only face. The original time directive represents a return to humanity's core principles when faced with existential threats. Principles where survival and justice take precedence over courtesy and protocol. He walked slowly around the podium, commanding the attention of every being present. "You mistook our patience for weakness, our cooperation for dependency, our courtesy for subservience. Today, that misconception ends." The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. The balance of power that had existed for centuries was shifting before their eyes. "Earth's demands are simple," Thorne stated. "The Cthar Dominion will acknowledge responsibility for the attack on Odyssey Outpost, provide full reparations for all losses, and submit to Council sanctions for violating neutral territory." He paused, letting his next words carry full weight. "Additionally, humanity's status within the Council will be re-evaluated to reflect our actual technological, military, and cultural capacities, with all the rights and privileges thereof." The Grand Arbiter, struggling to maintain the facade of control, asked, "And if these demands are not met, then the Cthar Dominion will find its military and communication infrastructure permanently rather than temporarily disabled." Thorne replied matter-of-factly. "And the Council will need to find a new location for its deliberations, as this station's current position will become strategically inconvenient." A ripple of alarm spread through the delegations at this implicit threat to the Council station itself. Supreme Commander Vrax, his authority crumbling before the Council's eyes, made a desperate gambit. "The Cthar have allies. We are not alone in seeing the danger humans represent. Who will stand with the Dominion against this unprecedented aggression?" The chamber fell silent. The delegations that had previously aligned with the Cthar suddenly found their communication systems requiring their urgent attention, their representatives conspicuously avoiding eye contact with Vrax. "It seems," Thorne observed dryly, "that intimidation alliances only function when intimidation flows in one direction." The Arbiter, sensing the inevitable, called for a brief recess to allow delegations to consult with their governments. As the representatives filed out, many cast newly appraising looks at Thorne and the previously overlooked human delegation. Ambassador Kalia approached, her tendrils now pulsing with a complex pattern of colors Thorn had never seen before. "This was always your capacity," she stated rather than asked. "All this time?" Thorn nodded slightly. Humanity learned early in its history that revealing full capabilities often invites challenge rather than respect. "We prefer to earn our place through cooperation rather than intimidation. And now we understand that some only respect what they fear." His expression softened slightly. "The Alasai were different. You saw value in cooperation itself, not merely as a sign of weakness to exploit." Kalia's tendrils settled into a thoughtful blue. "What comes next, Ambassador?" "After today, the Council can never return to what it was." "That," Thorn replied, "is entirely the point." The recess lasted longer than scheduled, 3 hours rather than 1. When the session reconvened, the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. The Cthar delegation was notably subdued, Supreme Commander Vrax conspicuously absent, replaced by a lower-ranking official. The Grand Arbiter, now adopting a tone of utmost formality, announced, after consultation with their respective governments, the delegations are prepared to vote on the measures proposed by Ambassador Thorn of Earth. The voting process was swift and decisive. With overwhelming support, only the closest Cthar allies abstaining rather than opposing, the Council approved all of Earth's demands. The Cthar representative formally acknowledged responsibility for the attack and agreed to the reparation terms. The motion to elevate Earth's status to full senior membership, with all attendant privileges and responsibilities, passed with an even larger majority. As the session concluded, Thorn received a notification on his communicator. The Earth fleet was standing down from high alert, maintaining minimal presence to ensure compliance with the agreements. The chamber began to empty, delegates departing with a new awareness of the galactic order. Many approached Thorn directly, suddenly eager to establish closer diplomatic ties with Earth. He received them all with professional courtesy, neither gloating nor bearing grudges, but the deference in his manner was noticeably absent. The Cthar representative slunk past without acknowledgement, his once proud posture diminished by humiliation. The Grand Arbiter was the last to approach. "Ambassador Thorn," he began carefully, "while the Council recognizes Earth's legitimate grievances and new status, the methods employed today were unprecedented." "They were necessary," Thorn replied simply. "Perhaps," the Arbiter conceded, "but I must ask, is this original time directive still in effect?" The Council would be reassured to know that diplomatic norms will be resumed. Thorn regarded the ancient being thoughtfully. "The directive has served its purpose, and our fleet is standing down. Earth remains committed to cooperation and peaceful resolution of conflicts." He paused deliberately. "But the knowledge of our capabilities and our willingness to use them when necessary, that cannot be undone." "I understand," the Arbiter said, and for the first time in their long association, Thorn believed he truly did. Later, alone in his office, Thorn stood before the viewport overlooking the vast expanse of space. The stars seemed different somehow, not physically altered, but viewed through a new perspective. The Earth vessels were barely visible at this distance, their presence a subtle reminder of the day's events. His communicator signaled an incoming transmission from Earth. President Alvarez appeared, her expression a complex mixture of satisfaction and solemn acknowledgement of the gravity of what had transpired. "The reports are coming in from across Council space," she said. "News of the day the Council witnessed humanity's courtesy mode turn off is spreading rapidly." "Dramatic, but accurate," Thorn replied. "How is it being received on Earth?" "Mixed reactions, as expected. Relief that we've finally claimed our rightful place. Concern about potential long-term consequences. Pride in our restraint." She studied him carefully. "And you, Ambassador? After years of absorbing slights and dismissals, how does it feel?" Thorn considered the question seriously. "Not as satisfying as one might expect," he admitted. "I believe in diplomacy, in building rather than imposing. Today was necessary, but it represents a failure of the very system I've dedicated my life to improving. A system that was fundamentally flawed, Alvarez pointed out. Sometimes structures need to be shaken before they can be rebuilt properly. Perhaps, Thorne conceded. The true test will be what comes next. Power without wisdom is just another form of tyranny. Which is why you remain our ambassador, Alvarez said firmly. The Council needs to understand that today wasn't humanity throwing a tantrum. It was a correction of an untenable imbalance. Your job now is to help build something better. Thorne nodded, feeling the weight of new responsibilities replacing the old frustrations. The Kthar and their closest allies will seek revenge eventually. Once the shock wears off, let them try, Alvarez replied, not with arrogance but with calm certainty. We revealed enough today to establish consequences, but not enough to show our full capabilities. Diplomatic courtesy may resume, but there's no going back to being underestimated. After the transmission ended, Thorne remained at the viewport. A new era had begun, not just for humanity, but for the entire galactic community. The path forward would require as much diplomacy as ever, perhaps more, but the fundamental context had changed. Earth would never again be the deferential newcomer, politely accepting scraps from the galactic table. The courtesy mode could be switched back on, but now everyone understood it was a choice rather than a necessity, and choices could be unmade. As news of the day's events continued to spread across thousands of worlds and dozens of species, the legend of original time was already growing. Some said it referred to humanity returning to its original primal nature. Others claimed it meant the restoration of the original timeline, where humanity's true capabilities were recognized rather than hidden. A few even whispered that humans possessed some mythical temporal technology that allowed them to manipulate time itself. Thorne knew the more prosaic truth. Original time was simply the code phrase for the moment when humanity stopped playing a role and showed its authentic face to the galaxy. Neither the warmongers some feared nor the weaklings others dismissed, but something more complex and ultimately more worthy of respect. A species that preferred peace but was fully capable of war, that valued cooperation but would not be victimized, and that extended courtesy not out of weakness but as a deliberate choice. As the artificial night's cycle began on the station, darkening the viewport and reflecting Thorne's own image back at him, he allowed himself a small, private smile. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new relationships to forge on more equal terms. The work of diplomacy would continue, but never again would anyone mistake humanity's patience for weakness or its courtesy for submission. The original time had come, and the galaxy would never be the same.